Hi, everyone. My name is Ale. I am so excited to be talking about letters of recommendation. I feel like that was one of the things that I really was intimidated by asking my professors. One, for advice on how to apply, and then to ask them for that letter of recommendation. So I want to make sure that we cover our bases, that you know how to give yourself time to ask them, who to ask, when to ask, and then how to prepare. So for example, let's say you are applying to a scholarship, an internship, to undergraduate or graduate programs, and you need a letter of recommendation. Make sure that you're very strategic. Some programs may only require one. Other programs require 3 or more letters. And so you want to make sure that each person that you're asking for a letter of recommendation is able to speak on characteristics and things, and showcase different facets of who you are as a person, so that the committee can really take a look at who you are as a whole and understand all of these facets and characteristics that you have. So when you're asking for a letter of recommendation, for example, if you're applying to medical school, some basics to have are 2 letters of recommendation from science professors, 1 non-science professor, and this can be from maybe a lab TA, it could be from a social science class, a humanities or business class. And then you might also want letters from places you've volunteered or worked. And all of these people will be able to speak about different facets of who you are, about your work ethic, about your passion, why you would make a good physician. And so when you're preparing to ask, you can either send them an email, or if you regularly see them in person, ask them in person and then follow up with an email. But they're most likely going to ask you to give them some materials to help them write that letter for you. So that might be a personal statement, a letter of intent if you're applying to graduate programs, a resume or a CV. And then you might also just offer to meet with them to discuss your career paths. And in all of this material, if you don't feel comfortable disclosing your status, you can always edit that part out. If you haven't been upfront with your professors about that, this is not the point where you feel forced to have to do that. No, that can be another aspect that you alone speak about on your application if that's something that you choose to do. So, okay, by this point, you've asked for strong letters of recommendation, and that's really important. So these are from professors that know you well, and it might just be that you did really well in the class, but you haven't had time to go to office hours. That's where you offer to meet with them and just get to know them a little bit more, let them get to know you as well. If it's been a class that you've taken a very long time ago, maybe a year ago or so, then it might be helpful to again set up that meeting just to refresh them on that. If the professor doesn't know you very well, they might just write a lukewarm letter of recommendation. And I've been told by my own mentors that a lukewarm letter of recommendation is just as bad as a bad letter of recommendation. So make sure that when you're asking, you ask them for a strong letter of recommendation. And if they say no, it's not the end of the world, right? You can always ask other folks. So once you meet with your advisor, they might go ahead and write the letter themselves. They might ask you to write an outline or to even write a draft. Now, for a lot of these programs, you're not allowed to look at the letter of recommendation. So just have that conversation with the professor. I know sometimes they're very, very busy. And so they do need a little bit of help with an outline, but it should really be them writing that letter of recommendation for you. So just to help them out, again, have all those materials ready. That personal statement doesn't have to be a final draft. Give them a little bit about your background, why you want to go into the career that you want to. Tell them a little bit about your accomplishments, don't hold back. And then maybe they can kind of highlight where you stood out. So for example, if you were the top 10% of the class, or if they were able to kind of remember you because you're one of the few students that stood out in the past few years that that class has been run, that's something that they can highlight, but they had a lot of experience writing a lot of letters of recommendation. So, a lot of the times they'll just say a little bit about how they met you, what they know of you in terms of how they've worked with you, whether you're a student or a volunteer. And then, a statement of support for you to go into that program or get that scholarship or get that internship. And so when you're looking at all these programs and opportunities, make sure that you give your letter writers as much time as possible to write it. If you just found out about a scholarship or an internship, it's okay to, send out an email. Hey, it's due in 3 days. I'm so sorry, but I just found out about it. And then depending on how busy they are, they'll say yes or no. But don't hesitate to ask that of them, because they might be able to agree. That's actually what happened to me with one scholarship that I found out 3 days before it was due. And that professor was just amazing and very, very flexible. And so she was able to submit it in time. So, just give them as much time as you can, if you can. And then gentle reminders every 2 weeks. If it's becoming maybe really close to the deadline, don't hesitate to reach out to them through their staff. They're really busy people, so staff are your best friend. They can help you get their signatures, get you to gently remind them about the deadlines. So make sure that you reach out to as many people as you can to make sure that they do complete and submit that letter of recommendation. And then when you have your letter of recommendation, just it's a letter that can be used for multiple purposes. So for example, if you know that you're going to be applying to medical school in a year, and then in the meantime, and you have your letter of recommendation, and then in the meantime, you also find out about an internship or a scholarship, you can always ask that letter writer if they can tailor it for you for these other opportunities. And that has worked out for me with one of my mentors. They've really been able to help me be able to get different, research opportunities and scholarship opportunities. So it's just something that even if you're not sure whether you're applying to medical school this year or the following year or to other programs, it might be a good idea to store that letter of recommendation or have that letter writer have it ready. And so some of the different ways that you can store that letter, your letter writer will most likely have it in a very organized place on their computer on the cloud, but you can also have them submitted to Interfolio. And so that's a place where you can have all of your letters of recommendation, and then you can send them off to professional programs. And if you decide that you're not ready to apply that year, you can simply ask your letter writer to update the date to when you are going to be applying. So for example, I thought I would be applying to medical school last year, but I wasn't ready to retake the MCAT. So I just told my letter writers who had submitted their letters to Interfolio, hey, I'm actually not going to be applying this year. I'm going to wait until next year when I'm better prepared. And I was so nervous about that conversation, but they were completely understanding. And they just said, yeah, just send me a reminder and I'll update the dates. So that's something that you can do. And that way, if you can use that letter of recommendation for multiple things, you can simply send it from Interfolio, which will be keeping the letter confidential, rather than asking your recommender every time you need a letter, right? So that's another way to kind of save them time, because they are very busy people. At the same time, like if you need to have that letter tailored, again, don't hesitate to reach out to them. Sometimes, it's just like changing the name of a scholarship or a program, or really like just starting over and writing another letter of recommendation. They're there for that. That's part of their job description as professors, is to support the next generation. They've had so many letters written for them on their behalf, and they would be happy to do that for you as well. So good luck applying and asking for strong letters of recommendation.